The political right really wants to stop global warming legislation in this country. Conservative Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann famously said earlier this year that she'd like her constituents in Minnesota to be armed and dangerous against the global warming bill.
I want people in Minnesota armed and dangerous on this issue of the energy tax because we need to fight back. Thomas Jefferson told us having a revolution every now and then is a good thing.
The issue of reducing carbon emissions to stop global warming also recently prompted conservative talk show host Rush Limbaugh to tell the New York Times environment reporter Andrew Rivkin that Rivkin should kill himself.
This guy from the New York Times, if he really thinks that humanity is destroying the planet, humanity is destroying the climate, that human beings in their natural existence are going to cause the extinction of life on Earth. Andrew Rivkin. Mr. Rivkin, why don't you just go kill yourself and help the planet by dying?
Mr. Rivkin, why don't you go kill yourself? The political right is loaded for bear against the global warming legislation in Congress right now. But give Senate Republicans a little credit for creativity in the way they've decided to fight it. They are now in day 2 of their bold strategy of fighting the bill by refusing to come to work, arguing that the Senate Environment Committee needs at least 2 Republicans present in order to move the bill forward. Only 1 Republican per day has been showing up to the markup hearings. Senator George Voinovich was the only member of his party to make an appearance yesterday. Today, it was Senator James Inhofe's turn. He arrived at the hearing this morning ostensibly to hand over a letter with Republican demands on the bill, including the need for a lengthy analysis of the bill by the Environmental Protection Agency. And despite the best entreaties of the committee chairwoman, Senator Barbara Boxer, the senior senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Inhofe, left the hearing after barely 15 minutes.
We continue to hold our hand out. We hope you... Let the record show we're holding hands right here. We hold hands on a lot of issues. This is not one where we've been able to bridge the divide.
We might.
But we hope we can. And Senator Inhofe, I really appreciate your stopping by, and I hope you'll come back soon.
I'll come back soon.
And I hope you'll bring back a number of other of your friends with you.
At the forefront of the push for climate change legislation and working behind the scenes to get it, as it turns out, is Al Gore. I got the chance to sit down with the Nobel Peace Prize winner and former Vice President of the United States to ask him about his efforts, as well as the attempts by people like Senator Inhofe to thwart those efforts. Mr. Vice President, first, thank you for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm a big fan of your show, Rachel.
Well, even if that's just flattery, I'll happily accept it.
Not just flattery. I was telling you earlier, I like the show. Your research staff does a superb job, and you cover stories that nobody else is really doing in that kind of depth. So
that's very kind of you. Thanks. Copenhagen next month.
Right.
To come up with a successor to the Kyoto Treaty. You were a negotiator for the United States on the Kyoto Treaty. It was not ratified in this country. And you described it as having been demonized. How was it demonized, and are you worried that whatever comes out of Copenhagen, they'll be able to do the same thing?
Well, I think we've learned a lot from that experience, and it was criticized mercilessly partly by an organized lobby of carbon polluters. And in some ways, this is not new. Every time we as Americans have tried to stop the dumping of pollution, whether in the air, the water, or on the ground, there have always been polluters who did not want to be restrained. And in this case, we're now putting 90 million tons every day of global warming pollution into this thin shell of atmosphere surrounding the planet. And as the scientists have long warned, it is now raising temperatures on the planet, giving the planet a fever, if you will, and the consequences are beginning to unfold. Melting ice, rising sea levels, stronger storms, deeper droughts, tropical diseases moving northward and southward in the southern hemisphere. We're seeing bigger floods and downpours, and the consequences in terms of climate refugees, the trickle has already begun, but for each meter of sea level there are 100 million climate refugees. And the carbon polluters do not want any restraints placed on their ability to just dump it into the air as if it's an open sewer. So they have geared up again, but there is a much stronger consensus and a much stronger conviction on the part of publics around the world, including the American people, that we've got to do something about this. There's a very strong majority in support of action and a strong majority in support of the pending legislation in the U.S. Senate.
In the United States Congress, whatever's happening in the real world, you have people like John Shimkus saying things like this in Congress. At a congressional hearing on global warming, he said, if we decrease the use of carbon dioxide, are we not taking plant food from the atmosphere? That's the level of at least some of the discourse in Congress on this. And
well, the leader of the House Republicans, John Boehner, said, I don't think CO2 causes cancer. Well, I don't even know where to start.
Michael Steele says we're facing an epidemic of global cooling, and well, that's the where do you start? How do you win an argument with folks who literally don't make sense?
Well, I think there are still some people, maybe 14-15%, who believe that the moon landing was staged on a movie lot in Arizona, and there are other similar examples. And there are some people with whom you're not going to successfully engage in that argument. But I would reach out to them anyway, even if they hold those beliefs. We need to protect our national security. We need to reinvigorate our economy. Last week, the Wall Street Journal had a story about a huge new wind farm in Texas, one of the largest in the world. 100% of the windmills are being made in China, and the financing is coming almost entirely from the Chinese government. They've set a national priority of leading the world in renewable energy and the new economy of the 21st century. Are we going to continue to buy our energy from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and a global market that is so volatile that it has to be regularly defended with troops going over there? And I know there are complicated reasons for the wars and all that, but our national security is vulnerable to a cutoff of those large pools of oil in the Middle East. When are we going to say, wait a minute, we want to be in charge of our own destiny again? We want to have American renewable energy. More solar energy falls on the surface of this planet in 1 hour than is equal to the entire world's energy use for a full year. And the engineers and scientists have now improved the technologies for capturing that and transforming it into electricity. When we make a commitment, the reason I titled my book Our Choice is that the first step is we've got to make a choice to reclaim our destiny and do right by our kids. But even those who don't want to look at the climate science or accept it ought to be concerned about the rising dependence from foreign oil sources and the rising need to create more jobs here.
Which is something that the last 7 presidents or so have been trying to get the American people excited about.
Since Richard Nixon.
Yeah, and it sounds great every time they say it, and meanwhile our dependence on foreign oil increases. You are certainly the country's, probably the world's leading spokesman on the issue of global warming. That makes you a heck of a target. The New York Times front-paged a story that gave voice to criticism by Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn from your home state of Tennessee, Senator Jim Inhofe, saying that you, by investing in companies that will benefit financially if these policies that you're advocating go into effect, you essentially have a conflict of interest. What's your response?
Well, first of all, in the 9 years since I left public service, I've enjoyed the business world. The vast majority of my activities has been in other areas. But yes, I absolutely believe in investing according to my values and beliefs, and I recommend that everybody do that. If I did not, these same people would accuse me of being a hypocrite for not putting my money where my mouth is. So there's a shortage of capital in the markets for the kinds of technologies that need rapid development, and yes, I'm proud to have invested in some of them.
Do you think that there is a political risk both to you and your cause if you're seen as becoming very wealthy as a result of the policies that you've advocated for?
Well, first of all, I have donated all of the proceeds from this book, everything that I've made from those technologies and more, to this nonprofit organization, the Alliance for Climate Protection, which is focused on trying to build the political will necessary to bring about this change. And by the way, we have a new website up called repoweramerica.org. And I encourage everybody who wants to help solve the climate crisis to go to that website, become a part of what we call the wall, and put up a short video explaining why it's important to solve the climate crisis.
Much more of my conversation with Vice President Al Gore coming up.